There is a belief that stops thousands of people from ever starting an agency. They think, if I cannot personally design the website, run the ads, edit the videos, write the copy, or build the automation, how can I possibly sell that service? It sounds logical. But look at how many real businesses operate. The person selling the service is not always the person performing every task. The agency owner's job can be completely different from the specialist's job. One person finds the problem. One person wins the client. One person manages the relationship. And another person may actually perform the technical work. That does not mean you can sell anything you know nothing about. It means you do not have to spend years becoming the best technician before you can build a business around a valuable service. You need a different set of skills. You need to understand the outcome. Know enough to scope the work. Find the right specialist. Protect the quality. And take responsibility for what the client receives. That is how the agency middleman model actually works. Think about a construction company. The owner does not personally install every pipe, wire every room, pour every foundation, and paint every wall. He coordinates specialists. He manages timelines. He protects standards. He communicates with the customer. The same principle exists inside an agency. If you run a video agency, you do not necessarily need to be the best editor. If you run a web agency, you do not necessarily need to write every line of code. If you run a lead generation agency, you may not personally manage every campaign forever. The dangerous mistake is confusing ownership with technical execution. Your responsibility is not necessarily to do every task. Your responsibility is to make sure the promised outcome gets delivered properly. That difference is what creates leverage. Now here is where people misunderstand this model. They hear, you do not need the skill, and translate it into, I can sell anything. No. If you have absolutely no understanding of the service, you can create serious problems. You may promise impossible results. You may quote the wrong timeline. You may hire the wrong freelancer. You may fail to recognize terrible work. And you may disappoint the client before you even understand what went wrong. You do not need expert-level execution skills, but you need operator-level understanding. You need to know what the service does, what inputs are required, what a realistic result looks like, how long delivery normally takes, what can go wrong, and what good work looks like. You do not need to become the surgeon, but you should understand the operation you are selling. Your first advantage comes from choosing the right service. Do not start with something so technical that you cannot even understand whether the freelancer is doing it correctly. Choose a service where the business value is relatively clear. Maybe short-form video production, website design, content repurposing, appointment setting, basic paid advertising management, email marketing, graphic design, lead generation. The exact choice depends on your market. But ask yourself, can I explain what this service does? Can I identify what a good result looks like? Can I understand the major steps involved? Can I find professionals already doing this successfully? If the answer is yes, you may not need years of hands-on experience before you begin learning the business side of that service. Before you ever contact a client, reverse engineer the service. Suppose you want to sell website design. Do not begin with, who can I sell this to? Begin with, what actually has to happen after somebody pays me? Discovery, content collection, design, development, revisions, testing, launch. Now you have a workflow. Talk to freelancers. Study how experienced providers structure projects. Look at common turnaround times. Understand what clients normally need to provide. Learn where delays happen. Learn what creates extra work. The objective is not to become the person doing all of it. The objective is to understand the machine you are about to manage. Because once you understand the machine, selling becomes far safer. You also should not wait until a client pays you before discovering whether anybody can actually deliver the work. You do not need to hire a full-time team, but you should build a bench. Find 3 to 5 potential specialists. Study their portfolios. Ask about pricing. Ask about turnaround times. Ask what information they need from clients. Ask how they handle revisions. Ask what causes projects to become more expensive. You are not promising them permanent work. You are building options. Because when a client says yes, You do not want your entire business depending on one random freelancer you found 10 minutes ago. The goal is flexibility without chaos. This is the part that makes many beginners uncomfortable. They think, if the freelancer does the work, why should the client pay me more? Because the technical task is only one part of the service. Imagine a client wants 30 short-form videos every month. They could search for editors, interview them, test them, write briefs, manage deadlines, review drafts, handle replacements, chase missed messages, solve quality problems, or they can hire one agency that manages all of it. That convenience has value. Coordination has value. Quality control has value. Reliability has value. Communication has value. Taking responsibility has value. The agency does not create value by hiding the freelancer. It creates value by removing complexity from the client. There is no reason to pretend you have 40 employees. You do not need fake office photos. You do not need fake team pages. You do not need to call yourself a giant global agency. You can run a lean agency using independent specialists. If a client asks how fulfillment works, explain the model professionally. You manage strategy, communication, and delivery while bringing in specialists depending on the project. Simple. The moment you start lying about your capabilities, your team, or your experience, you create risk that no sales tactic can fix. Sell confidently, but sell truthfully. The goal is to build a business you can defend when the client starts asking real questions. When you finally speak to prospects, do not obsess over technical jargon. Most clients are not excited about the software. They are excited about what the software helps them achieve. Do not lead with, we use 5 different editing platforms. Talk about producing consistent videos without consuming their internal team's time. Do not lead with, we build websites using this specific technology. Talk about creating a cleaner customer experience and a professional online presence. Do not lead with, we have advanced campaign management systems. Talk about what the business is trying to improve. The specialist cares about execution. The client cares about the business problem. Your job is to understand both languages. Selling the outcome does not mean guaranteeing something you cannot guarantee. This matters especially with marketing services. You might improve a landing page. You might run a campaign. You might create better content. But you cannot responsibly promise every client a specific amount of revenue if dozens of factors sit outside your control. Promise the work you can control, the process, the deliverables, the service level, the agreed scope, and describe expected business outcomes carefully. Professional agencies manage expectations before the contract begins. Bad agencies create expectations first and figure out reality later. That difference will determine whether your first client becomes a testimonial or a problem. Now we reach the part that decides whether this is an agency or an expensive hobby. Pricing. Do not randomly decide. I'll charge $3,000. Start with fulfillment. Suppose a specialist charges $1,200. Maybe software and project expenses add $200. Maybe revisions create another cost buffer. You also need room for your management time. Sales. Client communication. Quality control. Unexpected problems. And profit. The difference between what the client pays and what the freelancer charges is not automatically profit. There are other costs sitting between those two numbers. Build the price backwards. Know what delivery costs before deciding what selling price makes sense. Otherwise, you may close a client and discover that success actually costs you money. Now imagine a client agrees to work with you. Do not immediately throw the project into a freelancer's inbox. First, lock the scope. What exactly is being delivered? When? How many revisions? What does the client need to provide? Who approves the work? How will communication happen? Then create a clean brief for the specialist. The freelancer should not have to guess what you sold, and the client should not have to repeat every detail directly to your freelancer. You are the bridge. Your job is to turn the client's messy business problem into clear instructions the specialist can execute. One habit can destroy this business model quickly. The freelancer finishes. You do not check it. You forward it straight to the client. Now, every freelancer mistake becomes your mistake. Because the client did not hire your freelancer. They hired you. Before anything leaves your agency, review it. Compare it with the brief. Check obvious errors. Check completeness. Check consistency. Ask whether it solves what was originally agreed. If the service is technical, create checklists with your specialists so you know what should be inspected. You may not perform the work, but you must own the standard. That is what turns out sourcing into an agency rather than simple forwarding. Here is another reality. Some freelancers will look amazing on paper and disappoint you. A beautiful portfolio does not guarantee reliable communication. A talented specialist can still miss deadlines. Someone may disappear halfway through a project. Someone may produce great work but require constant management. This is why an agency needs redundancy. Do not let one freelancer become your entire fulfillment system. Build relationships with multiple people. Use small test projects where possible. Track who communicates well, who hits deadlines, who handles feedback professionally. The strongest agency owners are not just good at finding talent. They are good at identifying reliable talent. Eventually, a client will ask something you do not know. Do not invent an answer. That is one of the fastest ways to lose credibility. You can say, I want to confirm that with the specialist before giving you the wrong information. Then confirm it. And come back with the answer. Being the agency owner does not require pretending you know everything. It requires making sure the client gets accurate information. Over time, those questions teach you the service. After 10 projects, you will understand far more than you did during project 1. You develop technical judgment without necessarily becoming the person performing every technical task. That is how an operator becomes more valuable. So if technical execution is not necessarily your main job, what skills do you actually need? Sales. Because someone has to create demand. Communication. Because clients and specialists need clarity. Project management. Because deadlines do not manage themselves. Basic financial understanding. Because revenue means nothing if fulfillment consumes all of it. Quality judgment. Because your name sits on the final result. Problem solving. Because projects rarely go perfectly. And leadership. Because the moment multiple people depend on your decisions, you are running more than a freelance gig. These skills are not easier than technical skills. They are simply different. And they are the skills that allow you to coordinate talented people instead of personally doing every task. There is one temptation you need to avoid. The client pays $4,000. The freelancer agrees to do the work for $800. And suddenly you think, this is easy money. That mindset creates bad agencies. If you squeeze fulfillment too aggressively, quality eventually suffers. Good specialists leave. Projects become harder to manage. Clients become unhappy. Your margin should reward you for creating and managing the business. But fulfillment still needs enough budget to produce work that protects your reputation. Do not build your profit by constantly finding the cheapest person. Build it through better pricing, better systems, better specialists, clearer scope, and more efficient delivery. Cheap labor is not the same thing as a scalable agency. There are also services you should not sell just because somebody is willing to pay you. If you cannot understand the risk, do not sell it. If you cannot evaluate whether the work is correct, do not sell it yet. If the service requires professional licensing, regulated expertise, or credentials you do not have access to, do not pretend otherwise. If you cannot find reliable fulfillment, do not sell first and pray later. The middleman model works when coordination creates value. It does not give you permission to operate recklessly. Sometimes the smartest business decision is saying, we are not the right provider for that. Trust is much harder to rebuild than revenue is to replace. Now imagine you repeat this correctly. You choose one service. You understand the workflow. You find good specialists. You get a client. You manage the project. You protect quality. You learn from mistakes. Then you do it again. Eventually, patterns appear. The same client questions. The same project stages. The same revision problems. The same quality checks. The same freelancer requirements. Those patterns become systems. Systems become standard operating procedures. And eventually, other people can help manage the systems. That is when your agency starts moving beyond you. Not because you magically learned every technical skill, but because you learned how to build a reliable machine around people who already have those skills. So no, you do not need to personally master every service before you can build an agency around it. But you do need to respect the service enough to understand what you are selling. Learn the process. Understand the client's problem. Know what good work looks like. Build relationships with people who can deliver. Price the service with enough room for proper fulfillment and profit. Set realistic expectations. Review everything before it reaches the client. And take responsibility when something goes wrong. That is the difference between being a useless middleman and being a valuable agency owner. The useless middleman adds a markup and disappears. The valuable agency owner removes complexity, finds the right talent, creates the system, manages communication, protects quality, and gives the client one person who is responsible for making the project work. So if you have been waiting until you become an expert designer, an expert developer, an expert editor, an expert marketer, before starting your agency, you may be learning the wrong job. Learn enough about the service to manage it responsibly. Then spend serious time learning sales, communication, systems, pricing, and leadership. Because the goal is not to become the person who performs every task forever. The goal is to build a business capable of bringing the right client to the right specialist through a system you control. That is the Middleman Money model. If you want more practical strategies for finding clients, outsourcing fulfillment, managing freelancers, and building a remote agency without doing every technical task yourself, subscribe to Middleman Money. Because you do not have to own every skill. But if you own the agency, you do have to own the result.